They never expected it. When Ibrahim Traoré's fiery words reached Kenya, thousands of young people filled the streets with hope, and for the first time, President William Ruto himself felt the weight of a storm that could not be ignored. The sun was setting over Ouagadougou when thousands gathered in the city square, waiting to hear from their young leader. Ibrahim Traoré walked onto the stage in his military uniform, not with the pomp of a politician, but with the confidence of a soldier who carried his people's hopes on his shoulders. The crowd went silent as he began to speak. His words were not polished lines written for diplomacy. They were raw, fiery, and direct. Africa must no longer live on its knees, he declared, his voice echoing across the square like thunder. He spoke of dignity, of self-reliance, of a continent tired of being treated as weak and dependent. He challenged Africa's youth to stand, to learn, to build, and to fight for a future that belonged to them, not to foreign hands. Phones shot into the air, capturing every sentence. Within hours, the clips of his speech were spreading like wildfire across social media. But what shocked many was not only how quickly his words traveled, but where they landed, in Kenya. Thousands of kilometers away, young people began to share the video, their eyes wide with excitement. In university dorms, crowded matatas, and village homes, Traoré's voice rang out through phone speakers. It was as if he had spoken directly to them, piercing through the frustrations they had carried for years. In Nairobi, groups of students stayed up late replaying his words, arguing, discussing, and dreaming. In marketplaces, even elderly traders shook their heads in wonder, saying, "This boy speaks the truth." What began as a speech in Burkina Faso was no longer confined to one nation. It had already crossed borders, igniting a fire that Kenya's youth could not ignore. In Nairobi, the morning after Traoré's speech swept across phones and radios, something unusual began to happen. The youth were not just listening, they were moving. University students poured out of lecture halls, carrying handwritten placards with bold words like *Africa must rise*, and *Our time is now*. In Kibra's narrow streets, young men and women who had long felt forgotten began to march. Together, their voices chanting in unison, "If Burkina Faso can stand, why not us?" Potatoes blasted the speech on loudspeakers, turning buses into moving rallies, while shopkeepers and boda riders repeated Traoré's lines as if they were gospel. Social media amplified the fire, with hashtags about African unity trending across Kenya, drawing in even those who had never followed politics before. For the youth, this was not about Burkina Faso alone. It was about their own struggles with unemployment, corruption, and a sense of being left out of the nation's wealth and future. What had been silent frustrations now became loud demands, and what was once hopelessness turned into energy. From Kisumu to Mombasa, young people organized peaceful gatherings, painting murals of African leaders who had once fought for freedom, and adding Traoré's face beside them. The government tried to downplay it as just another internet trend, but the truth was visible on every corner. Kenya's youth had found their voice, and it was rising in a chorus that refused to be ignored. The words of one leader thousands of miles away had awakened a sleeping giant, and now the heartbeat of Africa's future was echoing through Kenya's streets with unstoppable force. Inside State House, Nairobi, President William Ruto sat in a heavy silence. His advisors gathered around a long polished table, their faces tense. Reports were piling up on his desk, images of youth flooding the streets, videos of matatas blaring Traoré's words, and warnings from ministers that the situation could grow into something far bigger. At first, Ruto brushed it off as internet noise, believing the excitement would fade as quickly as it had come. But each passing day told a different story. Outside, the chants grew louder, the gatherings bigger, and the energy more determined. Markets, schools, and even churchyards buzzed with conversations about dignity, corruption, and African unity. Foreign diplomats began to whisper their concerns, and business leaders complained of disruptions in the capital. Ruto's closest allies urged him to act, but he hesitated, fearing that a heavy hand might only add fuel to the fire. His silence, however, became a weapon for the people. Every day without a response made the youth believe they were winning, that the president himself had no answer to their demands. In the city, rumors spread that Ruto was nervous, that he was watching but unsure of what to do. On social media, young Kenyans mocked the silence, posting memes that compared him to a sleeping lion who had been startled awake. The image of Traoré's bold voice stood in sharp contrast to Ruto's quiet caution, and the people noticed. It was becoming clear that the struggle was no longer about a speech from Burkina Faso. It was now about Kenya's own future. The president could no longer ignore the storm at his gates. But every option before him seemed dangerous. The silence that once felt safe was quickly becoming unbearable. The tension finally snapped on a humid Friday afternoon, when thousands of young Kenyans flooded Uhuru Park in Nairobi, waving banners painted in red, green, and black, not against their nation, but for it. Their chants were louder than the city's traffic, their songs echoing messages of unity, justice, and freedom that shook the capital to its core. What began as scattered marches had now become a single movement, one voice rising from many throats. Refusing to be silenced, police lined the streets, shields in hand. But unlike the past, the youth did not come with stones or anger. They came with books, flags, and placards quoting Traore's words. Africa must no longer live on its knees. The images spread across television screens and social media, showing a generation that had turned frustration into courage for the first time. Even older Kenyans, who had long accepted the weight of corruption and broken promises, joined there. Children in the streets, clapping, singing, and standing shoulder to shoulder. President Ruto watched the live broadcast from State House, his face heavy with worry. His advisors shouted conflicting strategies, some urging force, others begging for dialogue. But the truth was clear. The youth had reached a breaking point, and the movement was bigger than any order he could give. International media picked up the story, comparing it to past African uprisings, while foreign governments quietly monitored the situation, unsure of what would unfold. That night, Nairobi did not sleep. Fires burned in barrels as young men and women gathered in circles. Speaking of a future they were determined to shape themselves. The message was no longer whispered. It was shouted across the nation. Change was not coming tomorrow. It was already here. Days of silence finally ended when President William Ruto appeared on national television. His face stern but weary, the weight of the nation heavy on his shoulders. Millions of Kenyans held their breath, televisions flickering in homes, restaurants, and crowded streets as the head of state prepared to speak for the first time. He acknowledged the youth movement, admitting that their voices had grown too powerful to ignore. He praised their passion, but also warned that unrest could tear the country apart if left unchecked. His words carried both caution and respect, a balance meant to calm the storm without surrendering authority. Kenya's future belongs to her young people, he said, his voice firm. But we must build it together, not against each other. The nation listened, some with hope, others with doubt. But one thing was clear: Ruto had been forced to step down from silence and face a new reality across Nairobi and beyond. The youth watched with mixed emotions. Some saw it as a victory, proof that their voices had reached the highest seat of power. Others remained wary, knowing speeches alone could not erase years of broken promises. Yet, deep down, something irreversible had happened. The courage of one leader in Burkina Faso had lit a fire in Kenya, and that flame had forced their own president to respond. As the broadcast ended, young Kenyans flooded social media, declaring, "This is just the beginning." The chants in the streets softened that night, but the spirit did not fade. It lingered in every conversation, every dream, every determined heart. Ruto had spoken, but the youth had discovered their strength, and no one could take it away again. The story had reached its end, but a new chapter for Kenya was only just beginning. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe now to Faso Histories for more powerful stories that shake the world.